All right, I'm just testing out a setup here. This idea of doing some live paintings, mostly relevant subjects, stuff related to the PsyOp entertainment complex. I think we're going to see a lot of Kirk costumes. I've already seen a lot of crazy lefties with their freedom shirts with the theatrical blood. I mean, that's pretty dark. I mean, that's crazy if you think about it. It would be like right wingers dressing their kids up like Sandy Hook kid zombies or something, and one of them is Adam. Like, it's just to dress up as Charlie Kirk having been assassinated. It's grotesque. But what's really grotesque about it is they think it's real. It's one thing to mock something that you think is fake or be irreverent about it, but to mock something you think is real is something else. So I'm trying to decide here whether I'm going to paint this little Buddhist sculpture I found, or if I'm going to paint the desiccated lizard corpse that I found. Or I could do both. I could do both. I could have this fat Buddha character with the gold, and then I could have this, and it's got to be like months gone. This thing is just shriveled, but it's interesting to look at. So, I mean, should I take a poll? I don't even want to put it in screen because people think I'm gross or something. But honestly, I was just sweeping, cleaning up, and I found it. And I thought, well, I usually take a picture of dead insects and stuff, or living insects. Last night I was videotaping this or recording this very large spider. Some arachnophobe recently actually told me that wherever you are, wherever you go, you're always within like 8 feet of a spider. And I don't know if that's true. It sounds paranoid. Could be true. What's up, Let's Go? Plain Decoded. Well, I'm doing still lifes. If I had a penguin here, I'd paint it. But I'm doing still lifes. I'm getting into the habit of painting what's in the Meatverse. I'm trying to get off the screen. Although I did ask Grok for a cubist Jason Voorhees, and I'm about to take this to the post office in a little bit. If you would like one of these, all you have to do is email me, infiniteplainsociety@gmail.com, and I will send you the specs. And then, of course, I use pirate ships, you get tracking. So that's my next task. After I do this, I'm going to the post office. I'm shipping some art today. And then we'll be back to do this mind map breakdown of Robert De Niro and his relationships to characters who are directly correlated with assassinations. And the book Catcher in the Rye. There's something about that as well. Let me go ahead and get started before I get off track. And this isn't an art lesson. Like, if I'm doing it wrong, I've got to be careful with this yellow paint. You get that on your shirt, and everybody thinks you got mustard on you. You look like a sloppy eater. I should probably get an apron, like my art teacher had. Catch all the flack. My point is that don't do it as I do it, because I might not be doing it right. But I've been working with these water-filled brushes that are sort of similar to using airbrush, where you pull the trigger to add more water. And with these, you're basically squeezing it, and then the water comes out. So this way I can keep everything very thin. So I think I'm going to probably add the lizard in front of him. I kind of like the juxtaposition of the well-fed monk with his bag of whatever, gold probably, and then the dead lizard at his feet. I'm turning my eBay store back on, And lately I've been working on doing a lot of local scenery. And there's some old churches I want to paint. And then I've been spending time near these cottonwood trees. There's one in particular I'm trying to find. I know there's one that's not far that's like 160 years old. It's huge. Quay says, I like getting close up pics of insects. Yeah, I take the photos of these insects, I take into Perplexity AI. And I have the pro version, which is free on a trial for like a year. And you can download an article on anything, prompt anything, and it'll read it to you. And its computer voice isn't bad at all. I used to do, as a side gig, I used to review books on Kindle where authors would pay you on Fiverr, like $5, read my book and give me an honest review. And I used the Kindle reader's voice, and it was the most monotonous thing ever. And it took an extreme act of will to maintain my attention on these stories. But after a while, I got used to it. Like I could probably have like the Stephen Hawking's voice read me to sleep, like a bedtime story. Like it's actually kind of calming once you get used to it. Did you see how they AI'd him and put him on a skateboard? And I saw these AI videos of people making these cakes that look like their pets, and then cutting the cake in front of their pets, and their pets are just like freaking out. And they all look 100% real. It's just super grotesque. It's considered AI slop, but the AI slop is better than what the best studios are producing, at least on the fly. Yeah, Buddha Santa Claus. Where did this? I found this random thing, and I thought, it's in a garage, and I thought, this will be one part of my series of random things that I'm going to paint. I had been fixated on painting energy drinks. If you've seen that series. Of course, I edit as I go. No, the video is actually, I think it might be reversed. I am right-handed, but it looks like I'm left-handed. And I'm going to introduce the other, the model here. Again, you might not understand what I'm doing as far as the colors and how random, but I always use the first layer as just a way to lay out the composition. You might not even see this green blue at the end of the painting. And I'm going to have to move Buddha back a little bit to make room for the lizard. But I don't mind correcting as I go instead of drawing everything in advance like I do with watercolor. With watercolor, you can't afford to make as many mistakes. The paper can only take so much. Yeah, just killing a little time before I go to the post office. And then we'll be back to talk about Robert De Niro and the Joker. And Travis Bickle, Mark Chapman, Catcher in the Rye. And that in itself is interesting. How many psyops have we experienced where Catcher in the Rye is like this repeated prop? So you could look at the book itself as something of a hoax indicator. And lately they've been doing the same thing with Turner Diaries. And I want to get my hands on some Order of the Nine Angels lit, since they're so frequently cited in these things. Yeah, I don't really know the origin story of this particular sculpture, like who he represents. Not a very ascetic monk. Yeah, I'm going to have to shrink him down, obviously. I was trying to get some work done last night, but I've been painting at this very nice location, but there's rules about sitting in the parking lot It's just one of these park and ride spots, but it has this excellent view of these cottonwood trees. For those, I'm primarily doing pencil. Sorry for the scratching noises. I used to drive the dog crazy. He'd think it's another dog. Dogs are very easy to psyop. If the dog's being annoying, you knock on the table and it just starts running at the door barking. Oh, by the way, I got pickpocketed like an hour ago by Netflix. Like, I haven't had Netflix in months. And I don't recall like resubscribing, but I guess you're never unsubscribed. I guess it's a lifetime thing. I didn't know. It's a lifetime obligation. So Netflix pickpockets me and I turn it on and I get this show called Mr. Robot, season 1, episode 1. And it's this guy talking about the real rulers of the world, how they're invisible and you never hear about them. He called them the top 1% of the top 1%. And he said that they rule the world, they control everything, and apparently they're following him. Again, I'm new to Mr. Robot. I realize it's in its 4th season, but I turned it on at random because I figured if Netflix is going to force me to pay, I might as well consume their product. A number of people have recommended it to me as well. And we're not watching Netflix for entertainment, because entertainment is a side effect of the real purpose of it. It's really worldview shaping and worldview warfare. But just yesterday, we were talking about Dan Brown's concept of the consortium, which is this group that runs the world in secret. And I think there's a case to be made here. Like, I don't think it's a controversial thing whatsoever. Like, I at this point, the political theater, the theater of Saiwar, is the biggest secret. Did you all see Erica Kirk come out yesterday again with JD Vance? It's like, okay, it's time to go to the camera. So she pulls out a Kleenex and starts wiping her eyes. Like, at some point, she's got to stop crying. Like in public like that. Like, I get it, but at this point, it's just performative grief. They should have invented squibs for tears, because there's no liquid coming out of it. It's all crocodile tears. But those people fall for it. It's symbolism over substance. And again, the Erica Kirk conundrum has officially displaced any attempt to ascribe PSYOP entertainment connections to mere coincidence. So shout out to that actress who made our job a lot easier. It's like, no, I'm sorry. All your favorite directors and writers and anyone with a big platform, yeah, they've all been co-opted. There's nobody real anymore. Not at that level. Not that they're directly culpable for anything, but it's nice to know, who's going to sell out their art for the purposes of waging psychological warfare against billions of people, under the presupposition that this is for our own good. I mean, I'm not unconvinced that this isn't the best of all possible worlds. Sometimes I say it could be a benevolent dictatorship. I realize it sounds kind of oxymoronic. Like, how can it be a benevolent dictatorship? But it might be a necessary structure for our purposes, here as human beings. Like, I haven't yet decided, is world government an affront to human dignity and freedom, or is it a necessary prerequisite for our collective peaceful coexistence? Like, is government necessary? Why does it have to be regional and local? Why not some perfect system that's all inclusive? I think the part that people might find disagreeable is that this aspect of government is done outside the realm of public awareness. But do they really care? I'd say the normies do not care. They're hostile to the information, in fact. It's like we're just buzz killers. I mean, we do somewhat, I think at times, deliver spoiler alerts. I'm not hyper focused on those. We're not here making predictions, although we can and will make extrapolations. Plain Dakota says, I could do without pyramid scheme, corporate money scheme. Yeah, you can. But what about all those CEOs? They can't do without it. You're going to leave them out to starve? That reminds me, another one of the connections that we've been making here with Joker is Luigi Mangione and the general Joker narrative of kill the rich. That's something that's going to figure in this mind map. Moving the lizard a little closer, making room because I want the Buddha's feet to show. I mean, I don't know if that's who that is. Again, I apologize for the appropriation. I'm appropriating somebody's deity or something, but I found it. And he would probably want this. I think gods like having, oh, you know what I could do is I could put his foot on the lizard. Reminds me of that image of that Saint George, or is it sometimes the Archangel Michael pinning the serpent to the ground. Like, there might be some symbolism in that too, worth exploring. I've come across it a few times. The serpent pinned to the ground, kind of a reoccurring theme. And that image actually has been picked up by the far right. They've kind of turned it into something else. What struck me, though, is having VP Vance hanging out with Erica Kirk so frequently. And he was there parading the coffin around. I think he was riding the coffin. I mean, I was like, this is just a PR stunt on 9/11. And remember, we found on Netflix, there was this thing called 9/11 Turning Point that came out a couple years before. And we were just, talking about this connection, though, with the VP, because people were suggesting that she should be vice president with him. And we all thought, okay, that's ridiculous. But one of her corresponding characters does happen to be a VP Kirk in that show Heads of State that came out the same year. So the meme of VP Kirk has been given new life with this relationship with JD Vance, and the associations there, where you're seeing it in all the imagery. VP Kirk, VP Kirk. And again, the actress who played VP Kirk was the one who died next to Charlie Kirkland. And she got the neck shot. But we're not just throwing all these puzzle pieces into a box somewhere. We're putting them together. We're organizing the information. We're systematizing it. I kind of got inspiration from this book, The Glass Bead Game, where this future utopian society is looking back at humanity's past, and they make a game out of connecting things, reinterpreting things. It's kind of this, it's not really described in very specific ways as far as the rules and how it's played, but the general idea here is they have this outsider view of the world and world events, and there's this idea that you could make sense of it all as though you were film critics objectively looking at the world stage. And that's kind of where we have been in our analysis here. And the master of the game, the ones who are really good, are the ones who are making these connections. And his name is Joseph Knecht. I think it's pronounced Connect. And I could say a lot about this book and the other ones that I've been reading concurrently. A lot of interesting connections with these protagonists. But the idea here is we're looking at history now through a different lens, which is inclusive of film and other entertainment media. And under the premise here, with the premise that it's not irrelevant, it's not just background noise to the real events of history, but that it's all part of a unified whole. And this History Bender series is going to represent this. But we're not just talking about terror attacks and mass shootings and the big flashy spectacles. There are other elements as well, like the various characters that populate the world stage. Like CK would be one such. We're talking about people who don't exist in the sense that you or I exist, but are more akin to reality TV show characters, but who are adhering to a predetermined set of life events. Essentially, actors, lifetime actors is one phrase I've heard. But we're kind of expanding on this, and we're going into the details as to which actor reinforced via his roles which psychological operation, what director was involved. And as we map this out, we're arriving at some interesting observations, all of which refute the general dismissive statement that you guys are just overanalyzing coincidences. You got to shut off your pattern recognizing monkey brain and don't think too much. We had someone in the chat last night who was just like, you're just stating the obvious. Why are you even talking about it? I'm like, if this was obvious, we wouldn't be the only people talking about it every day. And the people who have been talking about it have not taken it far enough. They haven't done anything with it. They talk about it, they mystify it, but they don't really dig deeper. Even the people who are saying that Kirk got squibbed, most of them aren't going further. They're just, was he squibbed? I don't know. I think he was. Hey guys, was he squibbed? And you're never going to get validation from within the system that you might have a point. It's not going to happen. And if you're waiting for that to dig deeper, you're going to be waiting forever. So when you have the right answer, I think it's wise to just move on and not wait for those who are resistant to it to catch up. And if you're wrong, you're going to find out anyway. If you're going on a fact-finding mission, the facts will or they will not support your initial proposition. And so what we have done, we're saying, well, if fake, then what? And we've arrived at some interesting places, which is, again, History Benders is going to explore this. But one of the main points here, and everyone agrees with this, is that if an event is fake, it was therefore scheduled in advance. We're not talking about flash mobs, even though these are scheduled, maybe spontaneously, but still in advance. So if you're talking about a media event that's going to receive global attention and it's aligned with contemporaneous entertainment on some big platform, then there's some element here of pre-planning, scheduling these things in advance. But the question becomes, how far in advance? And this has relevance because it's one thing to perpetrate a hoax to influence a news cycle. It's quite another if you have an event meant to influence world history that is scheduled decades prior to it occurring. That's a magnitude of difference when we're talking about media and government and what it all really is. And it just raises a lot of questions. And no one goes that far. I hear people say, like, big channels always have these opinions. They're always like, well, what does it matter if he's alive or dead? What do you mean, what does it matter? If he's alive, then we can actually notice, look at, and observe the participants in the deception. Like, this is a great unmasking opportunity for how these conspiracy theories work. Like, at this point, it's safe to say, and this should be your stance, when you're listening to Candace Owens, you're not listening to an investigator investigating a crime scene, trying to find who did it. You have someone who is doling out engineered narratives at regular intervals. She was never going to arrive at anything but the conclusion that she has already arrived at. It was always part of this template. And the template aspect of it is, again, one of these hoax indicators. But this Robert De Niro thing is going to get interesting because it connects the Reagan shooting to De Niro, to the Butler shooting, to the Joker. And these are not insignificant connections, as you'll see. But Robert De Niro plays a very specific role in all of this stuff. If you look at how he was platformed as Trump was running for office, and his quotes, his statements were viral, and he was making this repeated statement that Trump was a gangster. That was one of his points. But I'm pointing out here that there's a role here that many actors take on the world stage when it comes to how they build up these stories. And they're storytellers, is what I'm getting at. And all these stories are there to build history, our contrived history. The actors as propaganda conduits. I am surrounded by mosquitoes. These things are insane. Can their proboscis go through your pants? Because sometimes I catch them like on my leg, on my pants. I'm wondering, are they actually getting through? Do I need to wear one of those COVID suits? Another character that we'll be analyzing is Joaquin Phoenix, and others have picked up on this as well. How there's a lot of Christ symbolism attached to him. And in general, and I've been talking about this lately, is the use of, oh, so the mosquitoes are in fact sucking my blood. How there's this intentional act of appropriating religious iconography and applying it to these movies in a way that is systemic. It's like a pattern. It's like we're constantly being subjected to the same basic stories. I watched Superman and the Fantastic Four basically back to back, and I was struck by all the sun worship stuff. The sun worship. And with the Fantastic Four, it really was solar mythology, including Galactus as Saturn going to consume the baby, like Kronos devours the child. And one of the characters, I think it was the Human Torch. At one point, they're playing with the kid, that Doctor, what is his name? The smart guy. He and his wife, they have this baby, and the uncle, the fire guy, is playing around, and he's like mock eating the baby. And if you look at that snapshot, it's like, oh, that's Kronos devouring the child. So I've been making these Saturn connections with Galactus because of his role as this consumer of galaxies, and he wants to devour the child. Well, that's all symbolic of Saturn and devouring the sun, dismembering the sun, and then in the morning, the rising sun conquers the night. You know, there's just basic solar mythology, but it's all over that movie. So I was looking into it, and it turns out that somebody noticed this during Rise of the Silver Surfer, which came out like, I guess it was 2009, I think, or something. But anyway, in that one, you actually see for a moment the shadow of the head of Galactus covering the planet Saturn in space. The Superman movie had a lot of strange stuff with numbers. So, like, I had my first defeat 3 decades, 3 years, 3 months, 3 hours after arriving. And he falls from the sky, but he's essentially a heaven sent savior for the earth. The Fantastic Four went into space in a rocket in a big obelisk, which is again a sun symbol, the risen savior, and they get their powers from the sun, from the rays of the sun. And there's four of them, and I think they may even reference or be representatives of like the four evangels, the four seasons, the four elements. And the quintessence, pure spirit, would be represented by the child, the light. And that's what Saturn was coming to consume. But if you look at the number 4 as well, the Fantastic Four, the number 4 is generally associated, like the cross, the 4 seasons, and this division. It's ultimately, again, a solar symbol. And the story and its subtext generally reinforce this idea as well. The human sacrifice thing. Even the Human Torch was kind of a willing would-be sacrifice, which ties into the Burning Man. And if you look at the Burning Man symbolism, it's been rather consistently associated with the number 33 and therefore, again, sun god stuff. We talk about this quite a bit. We have covered this stuff, like back when the guy set himself on fire in front of the White House. I shouldn't have to tell you his age, or the fact that it was 33 years prior that the same thing happened with another 33-year-old. It's like, that's some kind of strange ritual. They do this thing called catharsis at the mall, where they burn a human effigy at the base of the obelisk. Like, who dreams up these things? What's the point? Is this just some kind of performance art? Well, no, it has a basis in a set of symbols and ideas, and it definitely all ties into sun god stuff, Osiris. It's all really about personifications, and they do it in these movies. Planet Dakota says the cult that runs this world worships all the Greek planet stars, numbers on the pyramid. Yeah, I think they have a more authentic version of what the masses are given. So, for example, the Order Templar Orientis, the OTO, practice the Gnostic Mass. And in my opinion, it's got to be a more authentic version of what you see in the Catholic churches. And the primary difference is it has a goddess. And I think it's definitely sun worship, but they also have this, which is the masculine. But you see what they've done is like they've divided it. It's like if you worship a goddess, you're pagan. It's the lunar stuff. So the sun and the moon stuff is separated. The god and the goddess worships are separated. But within the practices, the esoteric practices, the in groups, they don't have that artificial division. So it's not accurate to say that the rulers of this place are Satan worshipers. Not at all. That's a caricature at best. They're more like authentic Christians or something like that, to the extent that Christianity itself, in my opinion, is, these are state creations. So what do you think it is? It's always some kind of syncretic blend, merging the most number of people under the biggest tent. Like a good example of this is Serapis. He's like this god they made. It's like, let's put the head of Osiris, the story of Dionysus, the wine god. Let's put some Zeus authority in there, combine the attributes, and merge the people that worship each. So it's always this like conglomeration. And so when I look at some of these newer gods, I'm just like, okay, that's some kind of a Frankenstein monster created by the state to encompass the most number of people. And this is where the role of movies comes in, and their appropriation of religious iconography, insofar as media is the new church. So what they're doing here is they're appropriating all these symbols, I think, to unite people under this singular worldview. Same values, same idea of what constitutes a hero and a villain. But it's definitely an esoteric. It's definitely a reiteration of something that is esoteric. There's nothing new about these superheroes. They're new gods. But their purpose isn't merely entertainment, is one of my main points here. We're not shown these gods in movies to entertain us and just to engage our imaginations. No, I think that the real purpose is more like indoctrination, although we don't get the full story because we're not, initiates. And if you look into like the fundamentals of magic and ceremony, especially if you look into the work of chaos magic, what they do is they strip away all of the traditional symbolism and ask, well, what's the basis of this? What's behind it? And their conclusion, this particular school of thought, is that these things are all interchangeable. That as long as they adhere to the same structure, you can use different names. So when you're looking at Superman and the sun god stuff, this is like, it's syncretically speaking, it's basically Jesus. Neo is Jesus in that sense. Neo, there's even a stronger case. I mean, he's the one. His birth date, 9/11, could be a clue. Some would say that's, theologians can debate that. But what you can point out is that Neo dies for what, 72 seconds? And then the Trinity wakes him up. She kisses him and brings him back to life. To me, that sounds like Isis resurrecting Osiris. The 72 seconds is clearly would be alluding to the 3 days before the resurrection. The actor Keanu Reeves has this enigmatic connection with the dog star, kind of like Jim Carrey does. But with Keanu Reeves, he's got a band called Dog Star. There's quite a lot about that, which I think might be worth exploring a bit. Plain Dakota says, I think what they do in these theatrics and art and news is it becomes some kind of a talisman. Please elaborate. But we've talked about this last night. When you look at the degree systems in these mystery schools, like the Masonic degrees, from 4 to 32, what do you think they're doing? They're not doing anything more than sitting in a theater, watching elaborate plays being performed. And these plays are loaded with information that you're not going to know what it all means your first time watching it, especially if you're watching them rapid fire back to back. It's like binge watching on theater where every component means something, and you'd have to know the symbolism in the background. So, there's a purpose to it, though. The purpose is conveying a lot of information, and I don't think it all has to be consciously appreciated. I think these things are designed to communicate messages to what you could term, I mean, you say the subconscious as kind of like a blanket term, but I think there's a part of consciousness that isn't like incoherent or asleep, but that is in fact very active, but it's just not under our conscious direction because we can only focus on so much. Thus, the ego as an aperture, as a filter to screen out too much so you can have a center of awareness. But that part of you that isn't centered in this, I think, may function more like AI in a lot of ways. Like what we were talking about, the movie Weapons and the number 217 built into it. And this is a good demonstration of it because I said, I'm going to go watch the movie Weapons and see what this 217 business is all about because people are noticing. And yeah, it alludes to the assault rifle ban and the 217 votes. That's clearly a part of it. But I had primed myself, like I prompted myself to be on the lookout for that number for something. That's kind of how you can plant suggestions and you activate that part of your mind that will notice these things. And as I'm going into the theater, I noticed it said room occupancy limit 217. And I photographed it and I put it on my blog. Because I'm like, okay, that's kind of spooky. Why am I saying 217 on the occupancy notice? And so some people obviously said, okay, you live in a simulation. And I'm saying, no, I literally primed myself to be aware of a number that had gone unnoticed by me every previous time. So what it shows you instead is that when you prompt yourself, your mind, when you put some suggestion there, you have a lot of peripheral information you're ignoring. But when you put the prompt, you put the order for that particular intel, it will serve it to you. It will deliver the goods. It will direct your attention. And that thing, that presence that directs your attention to notice synchronicities, it's not God, it's not some angel or some higher power. It's your own mind that isn't under your direct control at all times, sort of like who's in control when you're dreaming. It's not 100% you in the sense that you think of yourself. And this concept, though, of a part of the self that is not directly under our control, but is responsible for our noticing things, intuition, etc., is something I've been focusing on lately because I think it's been overly mystified. In fact, sometimes I wonder if a lot of mysticism and religious thought might just be a misunderstanding of the mind, and that maybe we have, for the longest time, externalized parts of ourself that we do not understand and attributed these things to something higher instead of understanding them. Like, this might be the case. If it is the case, then the religions are all doing it wrong, or they're deliberately gatekeeping this. And why would they do that? Well, why would they make us visually illiterate so we can't tell real from fake? Why have there always been instances of power elite maintaining knowledge disparities through enforced ignorance and illiteracy? I mean, I kind of think it would be on brand for something like religion to be nothing more than a gatekeeper against higher awareness and possible functionalities. I mean, what about all these things that have been listed as not real, like precognition, telepathy, etc.? Because I've not really concealed the fact that I do rely on my intuition quite a bit. But when I say intuition, I don't believe it's um, merely some kind of random thing or a subconscious prompting, but I think it's actually prompting from a more informed part of the self, something that is always working, making connections. Uh, the best way to describe it, there's these terms that New Agers use, and I kind of shy away from that because, again, I think it's important not to mystify it. Because one consistent thing that I've noted when it comes to synchronicity is that in addition to having the connections between what you're thinking, what you're perceiving, and a series of events, there's always this element of something drawing my attention. And what is that something? And that something seems to be paying more attention than I am, to my own life. And I think that something, again, is something that has been wrongfully externalized. So the question is, can it be brought under conscious control? Well, isn't that what NLP is? Neurolinguistic programming. Isn't that what law of attraction is? A prayer. These are all attempts to reach out to something, quote, higher. But what if this thing that is higher isn't really that high? But what if it's like right there and we've just been unaware of it, so we haven't cultivated it? Because you start noticing patterns and people are like, okay, you're crazy. My favorite thing, though, I think I heard it from the Daily Beast because they reviewed us. They were spying on us. They said that we were shit posting into oblivion. They said they witnessed the information equivalent of clear cutting a forest. They didn't like what we were doing. But one of the writers described all of this as, we have pattern recognizing monkey brains. So it's like, okay, it's my monkey brain is causing me to think too much about media mind control and mass influence operations. That's what it is. It's just some instinctual thing. You can just ignore it. No, I think that kind of pattern recognition that employ, like, you talk about like free association or any of these things where, yeah, there's no like verbal communication with this part of your mind you're using to access even creativity. It's just like opening a channel is more about how I would describe it. Yeah, I just a couple of found objects. One of them being a lizard, and the other one being a sculpture of a Santa Claus Buddha. Armin Ross says, the book I'm writing that I asked you for the hoax indicators will touch upon what you described as that higher version of you that is individually more alert. Yeah, and it's not really a new concept, but it's always been, I would say, mal-appropriated by New Age thought, mystical thought, or it's been misdescribed by religion. I've been listening to a lot of audio of Carl Gustav Jung and his concept of psychic integration and the shadow. Very intriguing, but I think that he definitely figured this out. He didn't coin the term, but he popularized it. Synchronicity was something he spoke about quite often. But again, it's very easy to say the universe is talking to you or something, and that didn't really sit well with me. It's like, so the universe is going to send me some mundane, almost cute thing, some meaningful exchange. Meanwhile, there's people around me, starving and dying. Like, its priorities are screwed up. It just seems too trivial. And so then the idea is that, well, the universe is playful and trivial and whimsical. And like, I don't think so. I don't think so. That's almost too simplistic. But what makes more sense is that these things are actually in fact, just an aspect of ourselves that have been occulted on purpose. And that's my point here, is that we have been left out of the loop. I think the Gnostics had a lot right, but I think they got a lot wrong. Like, one of the things I noticed in a lot of Gnostic thought is the notion that the world is a fallen place, that you should abstain from it, that the world's the enemy and it's a false construct. And I kind of think that's very negative, for one. And it kind of has this built in, like the Matrix does, like the system is against you, which I don't know how much of this is true. But I do think there's something to the Gnostic ideas of this having some kind of a basic tug of war between soul and matter, light and dark. And that ultimately, the idea is that the soul has to maintain awareness of itself, or it identifies with the dark and does not have immortality at that point. Like, so reincarnation might not be a given if you forget what you originated from. Like, so if you're totally locked into the paradigm, you accept the premise that you're just an ape, a very evolved ape with a big ego, coping with the meaninglessness of the universe by making up philosophy, that none of this actually means anything. If you buy into that, it's possible that you could, in fact, not have any real awareness of this higher self, of this more integrated concept of the soul, because it doesn't exist. Intuition is just some kind of a fluke. That telepathy and precognition obviously don't exist. So if you're locked in this certain paradigm, I think it could, in fact, essentially damn you. I mean, isn't that like, when you see the image of the dog-headed god and the scales and he's weighing the heart and the feather? And the idea is that if your heart weighs more than the feather, that big hippopotamus thing eats you when you go into oblivion. But if your heart's lighter than the feather, then you get immortality. Like, there's this idea that if your flesh outweighs your spirit, and I don't think this necessarily means like sin or bad behavior, but I think it's about awareness. If your physical awareness trumps any kind of higher awareness, or even rules it out because you're told these things don't exist, that this part of you doesn't exist, then I wonder, do you end up in some kind of oblivion? Maybe reincarnation's a reward for keeping your head above water. Because it does seem like everything in the world is geared towards cutting off this idea of there even being a soul, or of there being meaning itself. I mean, the very idea of synchronicity is, again, it's not scientific. It's New Age. It's apophenia, if anything. You could possibly diagnose it. That's what they said about Candace Owens, which, again, these are planted narratives. If you notice a lot of connections, you're crazy. But the newer Gnostics aren't so world rejecting. I mean, I'm just talking about the Cathars and these others, and the idea of um, refusing the world, perhaps even not having children because the world's so bad. But the new ones, the New Agers, aren't like that at all. I noticed that the pagan and the occult, this Crowleyite stuff, is very worldly. In fact, they actually worship the goddess that they actually refer to her as Babylon. And if you look at the lifestyle of Aleister Crowley, and that's their main holy man, it kind of tells you that now, the new Gnostics are in fact very much in line with even LaVeyan Satanism. Where they basically saw sin as a path to enlightenment. You know, I found this, I don't have the book anymore, but I did find this book on rituals from the group in the 60s. And they had this one, and it was about this peacock god, symbolizing Lucifer. But anyway, I had this ritual about going into the devil's past. And it said this ritual would correspond to the 34th degree. And the whole ritual was about renouncing the world of fools and entering into this paradise called Shambhala, beyond the north. And that you had to take some kind of an oath of non-hypocrisy and recognizing the world is a big deception. I mean, it's an interesting litany. I mean, I don't know if these things are, performed publicly. Malak Tawas. Yeah, that's the one. The Peacock King. Yeah, it made me think of NBC. The peacock. Yeah, the peacock is like the symbol of. Now, I don't know what the association is between peacocks and Lucifer, except maybe it's pride, God's most beautiful angel, or something like that. But it wouldn't be the singing voice. Those things are, I mean, they sound kind of hideous at times. They have them running free around the zoo here, and they throw their feathers up and they like vibrate, and everything just shakes and rattles. It's pretty wild. Their mating dances are intimidating. I was walking down this trail where I often see roadrunners, which look like mini velociraptors. And I thought, I've never heard them. I wonder what kind of sound they make. And as soon as I said that, it started making these sounds. It's kind of this clicking thing. Kind of reminded me of the Predator. One version of Gnosticism I've been coming up against lately, or coming across quite a lot on Twitter, promotes the idea that there is a source of all creation. And somewhere along the line, some entity described as a lion-headed dragon, or a lion with a serpent tail, some kind of hybrid chimera thing, that this thing created the world. And it crowned itself king of the universe, but it's actually a not really God, but that this is the creator of the world and us, or at least imposters as such. And from this view, the God of the Bible would in fact be not the main creator, but this false imposter God that enslaves souls for their endless worship and adoration, and that the real God is just distant and not even connected in that way, but just kind of this background source of everything. And in this view, Jesus was not the son of this thing, but rather showing the way to defeat it or oppose it, transcend its world. And so it's the demiurge concept, which makes the God that most people worship the enemy of man. And then this would also replace Satan in the garden as, instead of the enemy, the liberator. Know thee not, ye shall be as gods, and how once man figured this out and achieved self-awareness, he had to be kicked out of the garden. Prometheus, rebelling against divine authority. These various characters have, in fact, been adopted by a lot of the satanic groups. Yeah, that's something too. The demiurge concept is that it's like its behaviors, its wants, its needs are very human. It's jealous, etc. It's like you're telling me that the mind of the thing, the presence that created the sun and the planets and everything else, this thing that created everything, is actually petty at a human level. Like, that's highly unlikely. Armin says the demiurge created the world perception, the worldview, not the organic world. It's a confusion to connect the actual material world with the image we're given of it. Yeah, basically, it kind of falsely asserts itself as God and the creator, but it's in fact more like the devil. But what a colossal joke that is, that the world church, like the most popular religions, are actually worshiping the enemy. Captive souls. When I see these people worshiping Charlie Kirk, Kirkianity, and I see how easily they were deceived by symbolism, I thought it wouldn't shock me. Like, I'm kind of agnostic. I'm not really a believer in any religion. But if I were to entertain the notion that, yeah, the God of the Bible is right or real, instantly I'm thinking that's probably the demiurge. Unless I'm missing something. I'm just going off of the accounts of what it has done and what it does. And it just sounds it sounds like demiurgic. It sounds very human. It sounds like a farmer giving orders to a species that are being farmed. Plain Dakota says, no, the Christians got it all figured out. Yeah, which Christianity though? Because every sect says the other one is serving the devil. It's pretty much like a circular firing squad. There's no real unity. The only religion that I see that has the potential to unify everybody, and frequently does on certain events, is media. Mainstream media globally, if you look at it as having replaced and supplanted religion, yeah, it is the big uniter. It is the Catholic, the universal church. And it gives us our martyrs, it gives us our mythology, but it just repackages them. Like, I was noticing this back when I started looking into the research materials for the secret religion of the gods, how a lot of this solar mythology is built into Star Wars. And Star Wars is just a war in heaven story. But when you get it down to the symbols, it's like, okay, pretty clear. Obviously, Luke is the sun. Saturn is Darth Vader. We live in a Disney universe. Space is like this new heaven, but if you look at the stuff, it's like, wait, there's a moon of Saturn that looks like the Death Star. Like, what are the odds? And if you look at Darth Vader and Luke's famous fight, you have the cross when their swords are crossing, the lightsabers. But when Luke has his sword hand severed, his lightsaber drops. That is basically Saturn or Set dismembering Osiris. And the obelisk is put there to replace the severed member. And so you can see how the severed lightsaber would symbolically represent what the obelisk represents, light. And of course, life, the generative principle. So if you look at that scene from that perspective, you're seeing the sunset, which is when the Lord of Darkness defeats the day, and the sun god is then crucified, dismembered. And this is all, again, personification of the cycle of day and night. But when Luke falls there, he falls into Cloud City, where he hangs from a cross. And then he's rescued, and they reattach his sword hand, and the myth continues. But the fact that you have this sequence of events, even with him hanging on the cross and the dismemberment of the lightsaber, then Darth Vader, Dark Father, and he's got the skull visage. He represents the sun god in death in the underworld. So yeah, it's 100% a reiteration of older stories, but it's told in symbolism. It's told in allegory, and it's not even subliminal. But if you don't have the initiated interpretation, or if you're not cognizant of the mythos behind it being deliberately employed there, you might not ever notice it. Armin says, the media is installing a new religion whose spiritual blueprint was written by Theosophy. Evolution, works for ascension, purification, angels helping man, demons sabotaging it. No different from the previous ones, but sellable to everyone, spiritual, religious, or atheist, as has been proven by UFO and medicine Eucharists. Yeah, exactly. I do think that is the point. So we do have this dialectic between progressivism, which embraces the church of media, and the traditional religions, where you find the people who are anti-media, who go for the positions of conspiracy theorists or anti-vax. Like, there's a pretty big split down the middle. But that's how these dialectics work. You can have a wide divergence of opinions on the spectrum, but they all agree on the central premise. And I think you're right. I think they are manufacturing a one size fits all. I mean, for example, no religion agrees on heaven, where it is, what it is, how you get there. But you'll notice all the major religions of the world acknowledge the existence of outer space as presented to us by NASA. And it's pretty much accepted by atheists that aliens exist. People who scoff at the notion of God think that belief in aliens is scientific, when in fact it is superstition. But they believe it because it sounds sciency, because high tech. But they're just high tech angels. They created the mythos of aliens to allow the atheists to still have a superstition about these intercessors, intermediators, and higher beings who might even show up to exercise the judgment of the universe or God or the Galactic Federation. These are analogous constructs. The atheists have heaven in space. Space is a heaven that all the religions agree exists. So they don't care what your regional God is, as long as you adhere to the dominant paradigm. Like, you can still have your little pagan gods as long as you have a bust of Caesar in your house. Like, you got to adhere to the main one, the main paradigm. And the clever thing is that they never advertised it as a religion. But if you didn't know, Nasatology is just as much a religion as Scientology. They were more blatant about it in the beginning. Did you know what Buzz Aldrin did on the moon? Sadly, his wife died, I heard. She's only in her 60s. He's like mid 90s. I hope he's all right. He's actually a really entertaining character. I don't have any problem with any of these performance artists. So when he goes on the moon, he performs a Catholic mass. He takes out a chalice and some bread, pours some wine, and he conducts the Eucharist on the moon. And this was done at the direction of his church down on earth. But I mean, think about it. He did a Catholic mass on the moon. They used to read from the Bible. They were very, NASA was overtly, I think, religious in its early days. Or they were open to religious symbolism and attaching it to this idea of collective ascension. Like again, space represents harmony, universal harmony, International Space Station. We might fight it out here on the ground, but up there, we're all at peace. It's just a big story. Plain Dakota says multiculturalism is very important to the scheme. Yeah, as long as they adhere to the basics, they can go in any direction. We live in this, like that bumper sticker that says coexist. Everything is compatible because they exist in the frame of reference of the world stage. As long as you don't go off world stage, anything goes. It is, in fact, that subjective. So I'm going to be back today. We're going to talk about the characters portrayed by Robert De Niro, the actor Robert De Niro himself, and its relationship to the assassination attempt in Butler and the attempt on Reagan in 81. Because again, what we're taking a deeper look at are the actors and the directors and the works themselves that are part of corresponding psyops. We're past the point of debating, is this happening? Are these coincidences? Now we're getting into the specifics. Like, it's not enough to call something fake. You really have to ask, what was it faked for? What's the purpose behind the fakery? Like, calling something fake is not enough. It's not a revelation to anybody. Not here anyway. Again, if you guys just got here, I'm drawing a couple of objects I found. I cannot recommend these watercolor brushes enough. Like, I'm going to do the background behind the Santa Buddha character, mostly with gray and with water. Like, you know how long this would take if I were using a traditional brush to cover this much surface area? But I've been using these for some time, and it helps me keep the painting thin. One of the things that I kind of habitually done is I'd allowed the paint to accumulate to where all of my paintings were just thick. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it does have an effect on the lighting with the lights. You can make it work, but I got tired of working with this thick, gunky acrylic, so I like to put a lot more water into it. And when you work thin, it's very easy to go back with these brushes and erase, to scrub away. So the subtractive techniques are very effective with this brush. And even half an hour after putting paint down, I could probably go in here and significantly reshape something just by using this brush and water combination. Again, it's very similar to airbrushing, because airbrushing is really using water. It's water. It's a liquid, but it's basically very thin. And then using the trigger allows you to introduce more liquid into the stream. God, I'm seeing Norm Macdonald in this thing's face. Norm Macdonald is one of those individuals who had these, I wouldn't say the death was enigmatic, but if you remember when it happened, people were pointing out that he was just on some podcast and he alluded to a possible death. And there were a lot of people who were hitting their heads at that time, if you remember. You had, who was that actor, that other comedian? Her name was something McDonald. She fell and hit her head on stage. Armin Reese says Theosophy states a new root race will be an amalgamation, a mix of all the races, hence multicultural. Basically, the Tower of Babel scenario enacted. Well, it was the Theosophist who said that 2025 would be a big year, that this would be the year that we're going to be given some kind of a missive from a higher authority. Kind of like in the Fantastic Four when the Silver Surfer shows up and she beams a world message. Like every TV has the Silver Surfer, and she's basically saying, yeah, Galactus is coming and he's going to eat your planet. Like, I think we're supposed to get one of those this year. They had a council like 100 years ago, and they said 100 years from now, which would be 2025, there's going to be something. I wouldn't be surprised the name Nimrod played an important part in the future unification. Yeah, I've been talking about the symbolism of Nimrod. He's the builder of the Tower of Babel. There's a lot of Nimrod symbolism, the archetype built into the character of Amazon and Jeff Bezos, interestingly. Dr. Evil in his Space Needle. And the Space Needle symbolically is analogous to the One World Trade Tower. And these are all symbolic of this idea of a one world, which again, we already inhabit, but they're doing this merging, constantly merging everything. So I think you're right. Everything is being merged. I've been thinking too about what does the alien invasion actually entail? Let's say aliens arrive, and it's one of two scenarios that they give us. One, they try to kill us all, and we unite to fight them back. We saw this in Independence Day. Reagan talked about it. So you have that version of the aliens where they arrive to destroy us and we unify in defeating them. The other version is the aliens are more advanced. They're like our galactic space brothers, and they come down here to benefit us, but we have to unite. We have to get rid of nation states. We've got to be one world. We all got to be friends. So they come along as this like divine referee, and they come down here and they get us into world peace. So both result in unity, but one is through submission and the other one is through defeating them. But the alien invasion scenario ultimately results in one world, that all of our differences are eliminated, as Reagan said would happen if we were invaded, that we would no longer see ourselves as separate races, but we're just now the human race against the aliens. So that's like the subtext to alien invasions. But what if a lot of this programming is there to get us to desire this, to say that we're too unruly, we need divine assistance. But in this new godless paradigm, there's no angels or God. So what's next? Aliens. The aliens could come down on behalf of the universe, some universal authority, and enforce unity upon us. Kind of like the UN, but like a galactic UN. United Galaxies. And we're just backwoods, and they got to catch us up. They've got to civilize us. But part of being civilized is we all have to unify. And then if you go down to the mundane level, terrestrial alien, well, what is an alien invasion? It's the dissolution of a border. And if you have no borders, then we have no nations, then the alien invasion is universal. In other words, the alien invasion narrative might have just been coaching us, directing us towards this idea of unity that is achieved with the dissolution of all borders, like a way of selling it to us as an eventuality, if not an ideal. And it's no coincidence that the far right is trained to view aliens as demons and a threat. And I've said this for some time, if aliens arrive, MAGA is going to show up in pickup trucks with flags and AR-15s. Like they're not going to be fooled by the alien deception. And you have Tucker Carlson, alien attack survivee. He survived an attack by a demonic alien. And his take on it is that aliens are not only demons, but according to his buddy at the Pentagon, they made a deal with the Democrats, which all ties into the Q story about the elite feeding human sacrifices to their demon gods in exchange for temporal power. Sacrificing babies to Moloch. Isn't that what they accused Clinton of? Whatever happened to that? Like seriously, whatever happened to that? These people who were behind the Q movement were so all about it, but they all lost hope. They all just stopped retweeting each other. Are there annual reunions? Like there should be annual QAnon meetups. I should probably start one. Just check on them. They got conscripted into a government engineered cult. They were, and I'm not blaming them. Honestly, I would equate it to a Ponzi scheme. They were told that they had information, inside information, that they were early adopters to something that was going to change the world. This great awakening was coming. The deep state was going to be punished. So they were given this big story. And it's similar to how evangelism works, where they're told resistance is proof that you're winning. If people resist you, if they don't want to hear it, if they're antagonistic toward you, it means that you're making progress. You're getting flack, you're over the target. So they take rejection as an indicator to go on. And the Q people are told the same, that if the prophecies don't come true, it's because of 5D chess. That basically Trump can do no wrong, but that the truth can't be told to everybody because it's too extreme. So you're special for being in the know. But they were given this mindset where their message would be rejected and ridiculed, and they just needed to hold the faith because they would be vindicated in the end. And all of them had this fantasy put in their heads that at some point soon, all the people who laughed at you are going to come to you because you're the expert, because you were there all along cracking the codes to expose the deep state. For Trump, you were a, quote, digital warrior, that Trump couldn't control the media and get this message out. So you're going to use the Q drops and your social media to spread it. So the Ponzi scheme was you invest your time and your social media presence, your social capital into this new movement, and you would get rewarded at the end. But it was a major rug pull. And this was very clear in 2020, where they're like, okay, Trump's going to save us. Trump's going to save us. Insurrection fails. He's going to save us. And it's like, Trump's got a huge announcement. And it's like, what is it? Oh, NFTs. And these NFTs were like Donald Trump's face on superhero bodies that were actually taken out of a Walmart catalog for various costumes. Like these NFTs were a joke. So you wanted salvation. You wanted the deep state defeated, and you've just got more crypto nonsense. Armin Reese says, you'll find a lot of interesting points if you look into the history of Japan. Until the Meiji Restoration in 1868, it had no unified language or culture, but it was mandated one, unifying regionalities. Yeah, that's what I was looking into Serapis over, because from my understanding of it, you have this deity that was constructed out of major regional deities combined into one. Like, what's that character? Voltron. We're talking about Japanese. There's just like cartoon of these characters that have these ships that all merge into one giant ship. Well, that's what I think of. Like, a lot of these gods that we see are unifying a lot of things. And I think that what they're doing with movies is these aren't physical idols, but a lot of times they're just characters in movies, archetypes. And they're merging these things for the purposes of syncing up our worldviews. That we're being served traditional religious values and paradigms and characters and stories, but under the guise of entertainment. Like, these are the myths. The media provides the pageantry, as in the psyops and the pageantry for this media, for the religion itself, for the paradigm, which is in fact a religion. They need to have us all sharing the same basic worldview. And I think that's done through, movies. Movies are like the new church in a lot of ways, in terms of it's a conduit for culture that specifically goes towards shaping your view towards the universe, towards power, towards one another. I've been calling the News Testament, and history is to the Old Testament what news is to the New Testament. The analogy being, one describes what came before, and the other one is what has happened since and what's happening now. So like the New Testament's considered like this living Bible, and it talks about what's happening in the future. That's where you're looking for eschatology, etc. And the news is the main worldview giver of this religion. And it is built upon our collectively agreed upon history. So the old news and the new news. So like, in other words, I'm kind of saying that religion is the original fake news. I mean, isn't it true that the characters, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are really just traditional names attached to these accounts, but that these aren't actually attributable to these individuals by these names? Like, how much of it is just a construct? And I think that what they have done is they've created a religion that is, again, looks very scattered, looks very split apart, disparate, but it's actually integratable, and they're in the process of integrating. That's what I think is a big part of what NASA is. You're looking at a major part of our collective religion, our worldview, literally our worldview, when you look at Blue Marble. And what Blue Marble had done, one of the things that it accomplished is it galvanized the environmentalists, because now the environmentalists can point to the world suspended in space, all fragile, Earth's so fragile, we have to save it. It showed us that we're all in the same place in a very tangible way. We all have to work together. It's all about this unity. And I'm saying that, this unity is more than just idealism. It's actually, I think, a description of our singular worldview, and they're going to be fine-tuning it as they go. It's a work in progress. Yeah, that previous live stream was interesting. Last night we had someone in here, and we're talking about, we got to do this history bending breakdown. We got to go further than just refuting the wrong answers, but we got to provide some examples of the model itself that we're presenting here being tested, show its consistency. What does it reveal? Because you keep pulling one thread, it's going to unravel the whole thing. So we're systematizing a lot of information that's just been floating around for a long time, without ever being consolidated or applied into anything. So we're applying a model here with a lot of the parts of the conversation that we added. So we came in here and we threw in elements of concurrent real-time programming and the drills that go along with it, and how this reveals pre-planning and therefore our history being engineered, manufactured, possibly years in advance when it comes to the major events. And we had some guy in the chat last night claiming that you're just stating the obvious. And maybe it's obvious to him, maybe, but if I was stating the obvious by definition, it would be talked about far more widely. But this is a subject that has been steadfastly and deliberately obfuscated and ignored, minimized, and marginalized. So, no, it's not actually common knowledge. And even people are familiar with the terminology. No one has codified it into a philosophic framework. No one has standardized a model here, like saying, okay, well, the reason for the consistency with what we're observing is that something about the structure of media, something about how propaganda is employed, almost analogous to product placement. And we're the ones who have taken this conversation out of the muck of Trutherville, a very stagnant place, and we've advanced the conversation forward. And obviously, there's been a lot of debate, there's resistance, and there's people who don't want to let it go, but we are moving the ball forward here. What's up, T-Dog135? Infinity Paint Society. Yeah, well, the guy last night was just not aware enough of the channel to be making any such blanket statements. And one of the things that he said, I'm happy for disagreements because it helps make points. He was just saying that, 99% of the people are dumb, and that's why they fall for it. And I cannot agree with that. I'm really amazed by what people can do, what people have done with their lives. Like, I appreciate people for their attributes, their hard work, and their achievements. And I don't walk around thinking, hey, because I notice these nuanced things about subliminal programming, I'm smarter. Like, no, that's not really the case here. It's a closed informational system, and there's no self-interest in trying to refute it or going against the grain, which may not even be in someone's character, but it's just not obvious. So you can't blame people for being locked into this worldview. I think you have to understand where they're coming from, which brought up the point of perspectives. So it's not that they're wrong or they're wrong, yeah, but it's not that they're intellectually deficient or something. The reason they have the wrong answers is their point of view sets them up for the wrong answers, and that's all by design. But when you're talking about other people and how they see things, you have to be including where they're coming from. And you can put them into broad categories that I think are sufficient. I mean, people are, broadly speaking, living in the collectively agreed upon consensus worldview. Like, that's fundamentally true. Unless they're where we are in this conversation, where they've rejected a lot of stuff. But if you're not actively rejecting it, then you've tacitly accepted it. That's just the way it works. And no, this information just isn't widespread or platformed enough for people to be at this. And people who do think about philosophy and look into stuff are always putting it through the filter that assumes that their worldview is fundamentally true, that our collective consensus is at least rooted in objective reality. But I've split people into essentially three basic perspectives, which is the mainstream default point of view. And then you have those who aren't accepting of that, who go a little deeper. And depending on whether you lean left or right, you're going to find yourself either in Woketown or Trutherville. But these are analogous places. Philosophically speaking, they're just mirrors. They're reflections of one another. So if you're not mainstream, then you're something a little deeper. The third perspective, the off-world stage perspective, rejects the world stage as objectively real. It recognizes this is where people are, this is their perspective, but it simultaneously rejects its validity on account of documented, documentable, observable fakery that invalidates it. And we're beyond just, making conspiracy theory conjecture. We can point to instances, and their overall the instances affect not just on news cycles, but on history itself, and therefore on worldview, which is based on your understanding of history, how we got here, and why we're here, and where it's going. Plain Decoded says, Tim, when you were younger, did you ever watch professional sports, and when did you stop? No, I never had the attention span to sit through even a single game. I really have never taken an interest in professional sports. Even in the Army, I liked the exercise, the physical training. But every once in a while, they'd say, hey, we don't have to do PT today. We're going to play volleyball. And everybody would cheer because they hated doing push-ups. They hated running. And we'd be there doing volleyball. And I would just stand there. I didn't even have a smartphone to look at. I just stand there, lost in my thoughts. I wouldn't care if the ball whizzed by my head. People hated picking me because I just hated team sports. I was even worse at flag football. I mean, I could have applied myself, but I had open disdain for being forced to participate in sports. They had a nickname for me, which I won't say, but one of our commanders said that he said to me, there's no I in team. They said I put I in team. That was like said behind my back. So I guess I'm not a team player. So if we're ever at some event and it's like, whether it's tug of war or flag football, you know who not to pick. But everybody I knew was into sports. I thought wrestling was cool, and I collected the cards. Then I figured out it was fake. I still remember angry friends, mad when I brought that up because they knew it was true and the fun was over. It's like, what a spoiler. It's like, you just killed my childhood. Like, nobody wants to be the iconoclast. Like, I don't want to have to be the guy that smashes their idols. They want to shoot the messenger. But what are we doing but engaging in some level of iconoclasm? We're saying this is all idol worship. This is fake. These are merely constructs. This is a God construct. This does not exist. Non-believers have always been enemies of groups of believers. That's always been the case. I got to add it's kind of a greenish hue that I'm detecting in this statue. And then I'll work on the necklace. I work in layers. That's why I'm not too worried about making mistakes. I can move stuff. And I know that I'm gradually building up the layer of scales on the lizard. I'm going to have to leave to the post office in about 20 minutes. So I'm going to put this at a stopping point. I'm going to let it dry, and then I'll come back and finish the detail. I'm just testing my setup. I picked up this clipboard, which doubles as an easel, and it contains all of my paint. It's actually not big enough to close with the paint on it, so I've got to use a bit of it, but it will serve that purpose. I found it at a thrift store for like $3. I'm certain that this thing, I'm sure of it. It had to be retail 30 or 40 because it opens on both sides, and it's got multiple clipboards on the inside. Okay, I'll resume the dead lizard and the Santa Claus Buddha when I return. Again, I'm opening my eBay store. I want to focus more on PSYOP related art. So if you have any requests, if there's a specific actor, dancing nurses, maybe something along those lines, I'm open to pretty much anything. And I prefer to work off of something AI generated. So if you have a concept, I can prompt it and paint it. It makes everything go faster, reduces mistakes, and generating ideas is actually time consuming. So for nothing else, that's one of the things I really like AI for. Luckily, I came across some random found objects that that I can paint today. But this Jason Voorhees is 100% Grok. I asked for, again, I said, give me a Cubism Jason Voorhees. It's not as abstract as I would have liked, but I like the facets. I like the hard angles, the bright light and deep shadow. It does give it dimension, and the face looks very like polished metal. And then I added the red. It gave it to me in grayscale, but I added the red sky and reflected the red in the mask and in some of the shadows, just to kind of unify the whole thing. But anyway, I'm going to do some more work when I get back, and we're going to get phones on soon. It's not going to be long. I'm looking at different options. I might get another 800 number, which has caller queue, voicemail. And if our objective is to get a lot of callers and to get people to just randomly call and leave messages for on-air play, that always seemed to work best. And so I might just reinstitute that. It'll make things more entertaining, and we'll get more audio contributions from people, whether it's live or something they just leave on the line. And we used to leave that open because we had so many people with press passes, so many people reality testing media claims. So I'd like to see a lot of that return. So anyway, thanks for being here. We will see you in Discord.